1928, Rosario, Argentina. Ernesto was born here into a wealthy family. Both his mother and father were well educated, and they were counted among Argentina's most prominent families. So Ernesto opened his eyes to a fortunate life. But at just 2 years old, he was diagnosed with asthma. Because he suffered frequent attacks, he started school late. The limitations his illness imposed on him cut deep. When he was only 10, his aunt's husband, a journalist, began sending him letters and photographs from the Spanish Civil War. Through them, Ernesto witnessed, from afar, the conflict between Franco, the fascist leader of the time, and the Republican forces. By his high school years, he was becoming a completely different young man. As a child, asthma had deprived him of so much, and it was as if he were now taking his revenge on it. Despite his illness, he took up rugby, developed an interest in poetry, entered chess tournaments, read voraciously, and pursued photography. He outpaced his peers intellectually, though among his friends he was just as well known for being messy. At 20, he enrolled in medical school at the University of Buenos Aires. This was the period that would touch his life the most, because during his studies he set off on a journey with his friend Alberto Granado. Riding a 1939 motorcycle, they toured South America, and along the way he experienced a great deal, but nothing left a deeper mark on him than the poverty he witnessed. He observed firsthand the desperation of the masses, oppression and dictatorship. Ernesto, already influenced by Marxism, grew even more radical because of what he saw. As a solution to the inequality across Latin America, he wanted the entire continent to rise up as one. His goal was clear: socialist revolution. After returning to Argentina and completing his medical degree, he took to the road again, through Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, before finally reaching Guatemala. There he built political connections, and by his own account fought to become a true revolutionary. He volunteered as a doctor, providing medical care to the poor, and quickly became a recognized figure among revolutionaries. He addressed people as Che, a common term of address in Argentina, and it was for this reason that his friends gave him the nickname Che. Guatemala was turbulent at the time. A U.S.-backed military junta attempted a coup. The communist group Che belonged to tried to resist but failed, and U.S.-backed Carlos Castillo, Armas, took power. After hiding for a few days, Che fled to Mexico. What he had witnessed cemented his firm opposition to the United States. He came to see it as imperialist and wanted to wage armed struggle against it. Mexico became one of the countries that shaped Ernesto's life the most, because it was there that he met many exiled Cubans. At the time, Cuba was ruled by the dictator Fulgencio Batista, a man known for his cruelty and corruption. In a country already suffering economic hardship, Batista was reckless enough to funnel state funds into his own pocket. While in Mexico, Che met many people Batista had exiled, among them Fidel Castro. The night they met, they talked ideology until dawn. Castro had formed an organization with exiled revolutionaries and was planning to overthrow the dictator Batista in a coup. Che was deeply impressed by him and came to see him as the leader of the revolution, so he said he wanted to join the organization. At first he was meant to serve as the group's doctor, but during military training he proved to be a skilled fighter as well, so within the organization he would be not just a doctor, but a soldier too. When the day of the attack finally arrived, the group numbered only 82 men, and Che was the only member of the operation who wasn't Cuban. The moment they landed in Cuba, they were met by Batista's army, and most of the group was killed. Che left behind his medical kit to grab ammunition dropped by a fallen comrade, and in that instant he transformed from doctor to fighter. The remaining 12 managed to escape and took refuge in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. The guerrilla war had begun. Over the 2 years that followed, the group grew back to 200 fighters, fueled by the support of sympathizers. They launched attacks against Batista's force of 30,000 to 40,000 troops, aiming to break the government's will. Batista responded with harsh crackdowns, but his own army had little appetite for fighting the guerrillas, and public support increasingly favored the rebels. Few countries in the world backed Batista either. Still, He kept ordering operations into the mountains, and kept failing every time. Freeze. During this period, Che grew hardened and earned deep respect within the organization. Those accused of betrayal or spying were executed on his orders. He had become Comandante Che, Commander Che. When the time came for the rebels to go on the offensive, their successful attacks brought several cities under their control. The end of the road was in sight for Batista, and the moment he learned Santa Clara had fallen, he fled to the Dominican Republic by plane. The revolution in Cuba was complete. Che Guevara was granted Cuban citizenship outright. After the revolution, he was placed in charge of the trials and executions of officials from the Batista regime, executions many would later call unjust. In the years that followed, Che held numerous positions within Cuba and offered support to revolutionary movements in other countries, though those efforts ultimately failed. Deeply interested in weapons technology, Che played a role in bringing Soviet nuclear missiles to Cuba in October 1962. He explained the situation, deeply alarming for the United States, this way: "If the missiles had been under Cuban control, I would have used them against American cities." He then set off on a world tour, addressing the United Nations and visiting numerous countries. He returned to Cuba, and then, 2 weeks later, he vanished without a trace. No one could get word of him, and the public grew anxious over his disappearance. Some even held Fidel Castro responsible, speculating that Castro, unsettled by Che's popularity, may have had him removed out of jealousy. Under pressure, Castro admitted he knew where Che was, but said it had to remain secret, and then shared a letter from Che with the public. In the letter, Che wrote, "Other nations of the world call for my modest efforts. I have decided to leave Cuba to fight as a guerrilla on new battlefields. At the same time, I resign from all my duties within the government, the party, and the army. I also renounce the Cuban citizenship granted to me in recognition of my contributions to the Cuban Revolution, ever onward to victory." At the time, he was active within a revolutionary group in the Congo, but the campaign ended in failure. Under pressure from Castro, he secretly returned to Cuba for a few months, but restless once again, he set out to continue the guerrilla struggle. Photographs that leaked to the press revealed he was in Bolivia, and Bolivia's president launched an intense effort to track him down. As the leader of a small group at the time, Che had refused to cooperate with local Bolivian leaders, turning them against him, a rift that weakened the group considerably. One day, an informant tipped off Bolivian authorities to the location of Che's camp. In a U.S.-backed operation, Che was shot and wounded in the leg, then taken to a nearby village schoolhouse to be executed. Seeing the man who would kill him, his final words were, "I know you've come to kill me. Shoot, don't be afraid. You're only going to kill a man." After his execution, Che's hands were severed. Che's death sent shockwaves through Cuba, and the country declared 3 days of national mourning.